And then.
Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. Very good Erev Shabbat. As you were all aware, in this week's Parsha, we have three or sons mentioned in the Parsha. The Ben Rasha, son who is the bad apple in the family, and the Tom, who is lukewarm about life, and the Sheni of the Elisha, the one that is completely separated. He doesn't know what to ask even. The fourth son, the Ben Chacham, the wise son, it doesn't appear until much later in the Torah, in Chumash Devarim, in Parshat V'Etchanan. So there are a lot of questions regarding this entire subject matter. So since the ladies are starting to clean for Pesach, so we can discuss some of them here. Somebody's cleaning for Pesach. But if, to me, the question always arose, why did the Torah separate the Ben Chacham from the other three? Why aren't all four in Parshat Bo, where it would be logical? I've thought about it a while. I haven't found authorities that speak about it. That always troubles me. You know, when you go along a certain path, you like to know that there are others on the same path. If nobody else is there, maybe you're taking the wrong road. So if you find something in the Torah that nobody seems to talk about, that's ignored by all the commentators. So on one hand, it gives you a chance to show what a genius you are. But on the other hand, with a great deal of trepidation, because you tell me, you know, Rashi didn't know this, the Shach didn't know this, the Meshech Chochmah didn't know this, the Chavetz Chaim was unaware of this, and I'm the one that discovered it. Nevertheless, we have a rule in the Torah, Mokom inichu avoseinu liyizgaver bo. The Torah is limitless, so there always is space for new and original thoughts, even by people who are not nearly as erudite and great as were those of previous generations. So I thought about it all week. You know, we don't have anything else to do, so you think a lot. So why is this separate? Why is the Ben Chacham in Parshat V'Etchanan and the other three are here in Parshat Bo? And when the Haggadah itself will say, Keneged Arba Bonim Dibra Torah, from the Haggadah it seems that all four go together. And here you have a wide discrepancy, not only in the narrative of the Torah, but in the years. Parshat V'etchanan is 40 years after Yetziat Mitzrayim. So it seems to indicate that at Yetziat Mitzrayim, when they went out from Egypt, the Ben Chacham didn't have what they asked. It took them 40 years in the desert. Now he says, so I think there's a profound lesson here. And it's the lesson that differentiates the Ben Chacham from the Ben Rasha. Because on the surface, the Ben Chacham and Ben Rasha almost ask exactly the same question. So where is the nuance that makes one the Ben Chacham and the nuance that makes one the Ben Rasha, if almost verbatim they say the same thing? On that, there is a great deal that has been written to explain why that works that way. But I'm not going to enter into that right now. I think that it is very significant because it defines who is a Chacham. The Gemara says, Ezeu Chacham Aroes Anolim. So the way we usually interpret that to mean, who is the wise person who sees the future, who sees what's going to happen? But you can interpret that more literally. Ezeu Chacham, who is the wise person? Aroes Anolod, someone who waits to see the consequences of what happened and then makes up his mind as to what happened or not. In other words, he doesn't give immediate judgment. My mother's favorite words to me when I was a child is, "We will see." They never answered right away, yes, no, we're going to buy it, we're not going to buy it. We'll see. And that's an attitude in life. We'll see. Because life is not clear. You don't know how it's going to turn out. The nature of people is that they make immediate judgments. They make immediate predictions. They assess things immediately. But in most cases in life, the original assessment is not necessarily what the end result is. You can be wrong. I remember, I had the old literature Rebbes, Rabbeim in the yeshiva, that had a somewhat jaundiced view of life, deservedly so. So I remember one of my friends became engaged to, in our circle, was the most beautiful girl that we knew. She was like a movie star. And he was so proud of the fact and everything. And he went to the Rebbe, to our beloved teacher, to tell him the good news. And he couldn't restrain himself. So he said, Rebbe, she's so beautiful. And the Rebbe looked at him and said, "She'll get older." Truer words were never spoken. Because that's an attitude in life. How do you see things? So the Ben Chacham waits 40 years. He waits all the experiences of the desert have taken place. And now when he looks back, when he's on the threshold of entering the land of Israel, then he asks the question, Moedus v'chukim v'mishpotim. That question is, what brought us to this day? What was within it that guaranteed our survival, that enabled us to pass? Because this is a new generation. This is a generation that didn't experience Egyptian bondage. It's very hard for one generation to share its experience with the next generation. We see that here in Israel, right? The generation that built the state, they were unable to give over to the next generations that we live in the same attitudes. That's natural. It's different. The Torah says, "Vayokom melech chodesh asher lo yoda es Yosef." If you lived in the generation of Yosef, you knew that there was never going to be slavery in Egypt. But if there comes a generation asher lo yoda es Yosef, that doesn't know Yosef, that never experienced Yosef, then everything is possible, including the enslavement of the Jewish people. So 40 years after Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Ben Chacham asks, how did we get here? How did we get from Egypt, trek through the desert of Sinai? How does a nation of so many people live in the desert without food, without shelter for 40 years? And now we're going to enter into the promised land. And we're going to enter into a different era. And for that, the answer is to follow the halacha of Torah. That's what the answer, because the Torah sets for us a way of life. If you follow that way of life, so then the experience of Egypt will remain with you. Then you're a wise person. But the Ben Parsha made an immediate judgment, even before they went out of Egypt. He said, who needs all of this? What good is this? He makes the immediate judgment. So then that's what makes him the Russia. I remember when I was growing up in Chicago, so we lived in the 24th Ward, which was the most, the ward in the United States that voted solidly for the Democrats, for Roosevelt, 98, 99%. So the entire contest for any elective office was in the Democratic primary, because in the general election, the Democrat would win no matter what. Probably the same today, yeah. So there was a Jew that was running for alderman on the city council. and it was before Pesach. The primary was Chol HaMoed. So even though he was not an observant Jew and he had no reputation for being very Jewish, he publicly made his home kosher for Pesach, and he bought all sorts of Pesach goods, matzahs, etc. And he had pictures taken of himself buying the matzahs because he figured that it would gain him votes. The vote came on Chol HaMoed Pesach, and he didn't make it. He lost. So I remember we lived on the second floor or next door. He stood on the second floor porch and he threw the matzahs out the porch. And he said, "The heck with the damn crackers." That was an immediate assessment because the crackers didn't help him. So what good is it? And that's what the Russia says. What value is it? You see the value 40 years later. I would say you see the value in who would have grandchildren that were still Jewish, who would have an appreciation of Pesach 2 generations later. So the Torah measured that nuance in the reaction that people have towards Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Ben Chacham is patient. He doesn't have an immediate reaction. Let's see what happens here. This especially fits into the idea that the Medrash says that 30,000 Jews left Egypt on their own early without Moshe's approval, and that they died in the desert. And the Medrash says that these are the dry bones that the Novi Yechezkel revives in the famous vision of the Valley of the Dry Bones, which we read on Pesach. So they left early. They left on their own. Historical events are hard to communicate. And they can't easily be understood by a generation that did not live through it, that it was not current to them. The Torah here sets up an impossible task. You should tell your children, and the Haggadah says, "B'chol dor v'dor chayav odom lirosas atzmo, kilu hu yotzam miMitzrayim." You have to relive the Pesach, the Yetzias Mitzrayim experience. How can you do that? So the Torah says you cannot do that if you make immediate assessments. The immediate assessment may be wrong. It may end up in tragedy. It may be a false start. You don't know what to do with it. So we have to wait. And the Jewish people were able to wait. And it's halacha that allows us to wait. Because Pesach remains until we're able to ask the question. And how to be able to deal with that has been the task of the Jewish people the ages. So to a certain extent, the question is, how do you make the past real? If you make the past real, so then the present has a different emphasis, and you're looking for a different future. But if the past is gone, there is no past. There's only the immediate problem before you. It is woefully possible to make mistakes, to become with the same intent that the Ben Chacham had to become the Ben Rasha. Because he'll say, of what value is it? The Tom says, what's going on? I think that without casting aspersions on anyone, we can all sympathize with the Tom. Because a lot of things are going on that we have no clue. They're good for us, not good for us. What's going on? But one thing is for certain, that we shouldn't make immediate judgments. You have to wait till the 40 years in the desert. All of that is experienced. A different generation arises. Then they will ask the question, and then you'll be able to answer it, that it was the halacha that preserved us. The halacha that allowed us to survive and thrive and reach this day. So that question that the Torah raises is raised in every generation. What is this? The famous gotcha question, does God care whether, I eat kosher or not kosher? Does God care whether I drive on Saturday or not? But that's callous, because that's making immediate judgments. And if we want to preserve the Sabbath, then we have to say that somehow we have to observe the Sabbath. And if we want to save the Jewish people, then we have to say that the Sabbath has to be observed, even though we don't see immediately the connection between them, even though it doesn't really make logical sense to us. But that's because we're impatient. We can't wait to the end. Friends of mine, we are in the Super Bowl season. So they record the football games because they can't be at home to watch it live. But then when they'll come later, they'll watch the recording that they have made. So the most cardinal sin that can be committed is to call up the guy and tell him to score it. What happened? He didn't see it yet. but you tell them so and so on. Because then, so to speak, there's no reason to watch the whole game anymore. So the Torah wanted us to watch the whole game. The Torah wanted us to be patient on things and to understand that through following through with the ideas and with the strictures of the Torah, we guarantee Jewish life in the future. We guarantee that there will be a later generation that will ask the questions. And if we think that we can disregard the question, so then there are many things in Jewish history which clearly illustrates for us that all the questions come back to haunt and disturb and challenge us. You never avoid them. I think that's one of the reasons why, for instance, Talmud is basically a series of questions. And different answers from different great people. And then you're trying to reconcile the answers. But it's the ability to ask the questions. But you don't ask a question on something that's not important to you. It doesn't really concern you. Because you think it's of no value. And that, unfortunately, is the definition of the Ben Parsha. And that is the difference why the Ben Chacham differentiates from the Ben Parsha, because he is not dealing with immediate questions. He's dealing with the past, the present, and the future all at one time. So I think that that's an important lesson, especially right now. We're going to ask a lot of hard questions about the last year and a half. Were we right? Were we wrong? Was it worth the price? Can we even estimate the price? What's going to be? No one has the answers to those questions anymore. All the statements of certainty that were made at the beginning they just don't exist today. And the Torah wants us to be chachomim, to be wise. The wisdom requires this ability to have patience and analysis and acceptance and loyalty. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week at Shabbat Shiur. I will not be singing for you.
The answer